Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is Tuesday, and all of our guests today on Donnie and Dolly, the team on check, brought to you by our friends at Bayside Oceanfront Resort. Those guests include Craig Button, standing by. Book your stay at the Bayside and enjoy the many amenities the hotel has to offer, such as oceanfront rooms, free parking, oceanfront restaurant, cafe, indoor and outdoor swimming pools, gym, and more. Call 250-248-8333 or go to their website, BaysideResortParksville.com. Just ahead of Craig Button, Delaney's OK Tire and Langley inbox. Don in Sycamoose. Sorry to say Luke's comments. We talked about this. I'm sorry to say Luke's comments are borderline arrogant. And then he goes on to say that you're class. You're all class, Rick.
Oh, who's it, Don in Sycamoose?
Yeah.
We love Don in Sycamoose. He's one of our favorite guys.
He actually said all of us are class.
We are.
TSN Scouting Director Craig Button joining us now. Craig, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you?
I am good, and you certainly are all class. And, one of the things that, when you do what you do every single day, and there's going to be discussion and opinion, people will disagree, but it doesn't mean that there's any less class when you offer an opinion or you disagree with somebody else's opinion. I think you guys do a fantastic job, and certainly just because somebody may disagree with you doesn't mean you're any less classy. So what I would just say, continue to be classy. Keep it high.
Yeah. How do you, and Craig, Luke Gazdick is getting a lot of attention today in Vancouver. I don't know if you saw his clip on an Edmonton podcast yesterday, but he criticized Vancouver fans, the Canucks Twitter. How do you deal with criticism yourself in this day and age?
Well, so how about what Kevin Bieksa said about the Edmonton media? So we have a national rights holder, and certainly they have the right to have their opinion, but the Edmonton media is passionate. The Vancouver media is passionate. The Vancouver fans are passionate. The Edmonton fans. And when we just start slamming people, and it's one thing to say, hey, listen, I didn't like this comment, or I didn't like this. That's one thing. We can disagree about things. But when you start getting into personal attacks and you start getting into scenarios where you're attacking not just individuals, but large groups of individuals and people that are passionately following the sport, I don't think that's wise. So to answer your question about how you handle criticism, there's times when you're going to be fairly criticized. There's times when you're going to be unfairly criticized. And acknowledging when you're fairly criticized and going, hey, that's a good point, or I was wrong. I think that is something that's significant. And when you're unfairly criticized, you also deal with it in a manner. That's why I said about being classy. And one of the things is, I'll engage with anybody on social media, publicly or anything, and I can, we have discussion, there can be debate, there can be disagreement, but keep it respectful and just say, but when people start getting personal and they become attacking personally, things become vulgar and in that manner, I'll be quite frank. They become out of my world. I tell young people and I tell young players this all the time. If somebody came up to your door and rang the doorbell and you opened and they started screaming insults at you, what would you do? Oh, everybody says the same. I close my door. Well, close your social media door and don't be open to people that are going to be like that. That's how I feel. I also saw what happened, coming out of the Memorial Cup with Braden Hache and some criticism of him, and people simply didn't have the facts, and they wanted to create a narrative about Braden Hache and things, and it was so completely wrong and offside, and they didn't have the facts. And what I would say to them is just, you guys don't have the facts. Do you have the facts? But they start on these narratives, and criticism comes, and we see these types of things unfold, and it's not even so much the criticism; it's what ends up happening out of the criticism when there becomes a groundswell of, I don't know if hate is the right word, but of animosity and vitriol towards other people. That's when the people better realize that what you did was wrong.
I don't think there are many people who would criticize Joe Pavelski and the great career he's had. Looks like he's going to retire, Craig. He had 67 points in 82 games. Not bad, a little bit less production in the playoffs. What's his legacy?
Well, I think Joe is that player that, found a way. He was a late round draft pick. He was smart. He was a player that you could count on. He was dependable. And you think about consistency over a career. I mean, Joe was wildly consistent. And sometimes with a player, even though he had success this year, you understand how hard it is to get yourself prepared for the long season. And it's not that they're not capable anymore, and they might not be as capable as they once were, but you start to say, am I prepared to get myself into a position where I can be successful and do the things that are necessary for me to be a contributor? And I think a lot of players end up in the same spot that Joe has found himself in. Inevitably we're going to start to, and it's just something that happens. And people say, is Joe Pavelski a Hall of Famer? I don't think so. I don't see him as a Hall of Famer, but I see him as a player that you wanted on your team. You wanted somebody that was competitive and productive, and certainly gave you everything that he possibly could give you. And I think when you can leave the game and feel that you gave the best of yourself throughout a long career, I mean, that's a legacy anybody would sign up for.
All right, Craig, we got two teams left, the Stanley Cup Finals, Florida, Edmonton. Who do you like? And talk about some of the matchups here and just the overall sense of you think it's going to be a great final?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any reason to doubt that it won't be a good final. I mean, you have two really good teams that, they've each won 12 games. So when you find your way to this point, you found ways to be successful. You found ways to deal with the challenges that you were confronted with by three very different teams. So I don't anticipate that it won't be a good final. I picked on April 19th, before the playoffs started, we did a bracketology. I had Florida winning the Stanley Cup. I'm not changing my mind now. I still believe that they're the best team. Do I think Edmonton can win? Absolutely. I don't think Edmonton's an underdog in the sense. I think there's two things that there's two areas that I'm looking at in matchups, Rick. So the first one is in style of play. The Florida Panthers forecheck as hard and as good as any team I've seen in the last number of years. And not only that, they're relentless. It's almost like they treat every single shift like it's their last. And they control the neutral zone because of that. And how Edmonton handles that is going to be really significant. They're going to have to match that intensity of which Florida plays with that forecheck, and they're going to have to find ways to take away a significant strength that Florida has coming into the series, and a significant strength that they use to get to this point. I mean, over the last number of games, if it wasn't for Shesterkin, this series would have been over long ago. The Rangers just couldn't muster up enough. So that's the team part of it, and Edmonton's going to have to get out of their zone cleanly and try to make sure that they can push the Florida Panthers out of that strength. I'm looking at the Barkov-Forsling matchup versus McDavid and Draisaitl. Listen, you can put Barkov against anybody in the league, and he's going to do a real good job. But then after that, if Barkov gets McDavid, that leaves Draisaitl with Forsling, or vice versa, McDavid with Forsling. So I think Forsling becomes a big factor in this series with respect to his defensive play and matching up. If you have Barkov out on the ice against McDavid or Draisaitl, I think you have to have Forsling out against the other guy. And you got 29 and 97 who have shown unequivocally that they can perform at the highest level in the playoffs against hard competition. So that's where I see it at. Bobrovsky's a top-notch goaltender. Skinner has shown that he's more than capable. But those are the two areas that I'm looking at. If Edmonton can keep Florida out of their forecheck and they can take advantage of that matchup with 97 and 29 and get on the right side of that, they can win the Stanley Cup. If they don't, and it goes without saying, if you don't get goaltender or whatnot, you're not going to win. But if they don't get that, if Florida's able to get the advantage there, Florida will win the Stanley Cup, in my view.
Craig, Paul Maurice called Forsling last week one of the best defensemen in the world. I mean, nobody saw this. If we did see it, the Canucks would never have got rid of him as fast as they did. You just never know when these guys are going to develop and what year they're going to hit their peak, the whole 9 yards. But he really has become one of the best defensemen in the league, Craig.
He has, and so I'm going to give you a quick personal story because I know what other teams are going through. Martin St. Louis. So I came into Calgary, and yeah, he wasn't protected in the expansion draft, and he left as a free agent and signed and everything. We know what he became. He became a Hall of Fame player. He was great. 0-4 at the World Cup in Montreal. I'm standing downstairs, and there's Marty and Stevie Bejan, Danny Gauthier, Jay Aguirre, and we're talking. And Marty is really gracious, and they won the Stanley Cup. And he goes, "Oh, Craig, you didn't know, and how could you know?" And I said, "Yeah, you're very gracious, Marty." But I said, "Let me give you a little bit of background. I watched you all the way back to when you were in U16 dominate. I watched you at the University of Vermont dominate. I watched you in Junior A dominate. I watched you dominate in the American Hockey League. If anybody should have known, it should have been me." And Marty slapped me on the back and he goes, "Yeah, you should have known." I wish that we all could rewind and make up. And sometimes players, need a different path. And Bob Gainey said this to us many years ago. Sometimes what a team needs and what a player is able to deliver don't intersect, and that's where opportunity exists for other players. I think that's what happened with Forsling. I believe that for Marty St. Louis, that was something that happened for him, and they took full advantage of it. And to me, give the credit to Gustav Forsling for continuing to progress in his game, and the beneficiaries of that are the Florida Panthers.
We started this segment off by talking about criticism. You haven't received any criticism from Flames Twitter about that St. Louis deal, have you? Through the years?
Not that I recall. Not that I recall, Donnie. But I haven't looked past the last hour. So if anything's happened previous to that, there might be stuff out there.
Everybody who's been a GM or every current GM has the same story when it comes to some player that they traded away. Right.
But there was a million good decisions you made, Craig.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you reflect back and you try to learn from them, and think back. Think about one of the great Vancouver Canucks players, Marcus Naslund.
Yeah,
I mean, Alex Stoyanov was a first-round pick. Marcus Naslund was, and it wasn't working out for Marcus in Pittsburgh, and they traded him. I mean, you think about that great line with Bertuzzi, Morrison, and Naslund. I mean that's one of the great lines in Vancouver Canucks history, and it was a great line. And so there's another example, and nobody's going to say that Craig Patrick was a Hall of Fame GM, and certainly, you do things, like I said, that's why I use the Bob Gainey line. Sometimes a player's path and a team's needs don't intersect, and players find the right spot and they thrive.
You see, but we brought up Martin St. Louis, and you had fun with it. You laughed at it, and that's what I think some people in our business need to learn from the great Craig Button.
Yeah. Well, not great. I mean, you've been at the front lines of doing it, and so criticism you get. I mean, it's how you handle it, right? And it's like anything else. And there's constructive criticism and there's negative criticism, and I just don't believe in personally attacking people and taking on large swaths of fan bases or media bases.
Yeah, good idea, Craig. Thanks for this. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
You bet.